My next guest received his undergraduate degree from Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. He's a journalist, writer, and Emmy-winning TV producer. He has worked for CNN and Good Morning America. He is the author of Black Fortunes. Please welcome to Money Making Conversation, Shomari Wills.
Hey, Rushion, I appreciate the kind introduction. I'm so happy to be on your show. It's an honor.
Hey man, I hope I'm the. I know your book been getting out there, been getting great reviews, and you broadcasting live here in Atlanta. Of course, you'll be heard on iHeartRadio podcast and Sirius XM 141 and 142 HBCU campus. Because I really want to make sure the HBCU campuses get this message, because it really is it's something about, because it's about entrepreneurship, and that's that millennial generation is talking about. That's what they want to be, and to hear about people who talk about overcoming the odds, overcoming a slavery, overcoming racism, overcoming Jim Crow laws. How did you, when you started getting into this? Let's give everybody your backstory on what got you started and saying this is a book I should be engaged with.
So, not to be too long-winded, but I started out
Tell your story. Tell your story now. Tell your story.
I started out in journalism in New York at the New York Carib News, which is like the
Yes, sir.
newspaper for the Caribbean community in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in Jamaica for a little while doing some reporting, and I happened to visit this place called Devon House, which is this mansion, this incredible mansion that has a restaurant and an ice cream shop at it. And everybody's like, you got to go. The ice cream is really good. So I went there, and it's also the house of the first black millionaire in Jamaica that they've kind of repurposed as an ice cream shop and all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went on the tour of the mansion. They told me this guy's story. He was a carpenter on a ship, in the 1840s, shipwrecked. He, this is right off the coast of Venezuela. He swam to the coast and found a gold mine and became a millionaire. So after, finding out about him and just his incredible story and all the things he did with his wealth, I actually thought about writing a book about him.
Right.
But, life goes on. I had to come back to the States. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay in Jamaica forever. So what I did is I kind of adapted that idea, and I started looking at African American millionaires here, and I really wanted to tell the stories of the very first, because most folks don't even know who they are.
Well, I definitely only one I knew was Madam C.J. Walker that you cover in this book, because Black History Month, they always bring up. She started basically hair care products, and she made her wealth through that. And so when you talk about her, I love the fact that you said she was the only one that really, flaunted her wealth. She bought the cars, she bought the rings, she bought the house, and she wore the clothes. So why do you think that she chose that path of saying, "Hey, I'm making this money, and I'm going to live the lifestyle of what I'm making"?
I think that was always her claim to fame, that, she kind of lived, a really ostentatious lifestyle. She wasn't the first, person, she wasn't really the black hair pioneer. A lot of folks think she was. There's another woman named Annie Malone, who also was a black millionaire who she worked for. And,
Right.
They kind of had a competition thing. It's very controversial, because her products were basically the same as Annie Malone's. When she went out on her own. But, she, just was, coming out of the Jim Crow era, in the early 1900s. And, black folks were starting to, feel like maybe it was okay to show off some of what we had. And she just kind of took it to the next level. She spent a lot of money. She shopped on Fifth Avenue. So everybody knew about her wealth, as opposed to the folks who came before her who had to worry about lynching and, had to worry about all sorts of, bad things happening to them. So they were a little bit more in the cut.
Yeah. Let me just set the stage here, because I want people to understand exactly what we're talking about. Because we read about today's black millionaires: Oprah Winfrey, Michael Jordan, Tyler Perry, Kevin Hart, and many more in the sports and entertainment industry. But your book tells the story about this country's first black millionaires, some of them born in the first half of the 19th century, decades before the Emancipation Proclamation. I think that's important that people understand that these people were out there being industrious in an era where, you were supposed to stay in your place. Lynching was just a norm. And I want to talk about, you talked about 6 people in the book. Well, you talked about more, but 6 people really were identified: Mary Ellen Pleasant, Robert Reed Church, Hannah Elias, and Annie Turnbull Malone. Then we had O.W. Gurley, and we had Madam C.J. Walker. I want to talk about each one of them a little bit. I don't want to give away the book, but I thought it's important that you put your spin on why each one was significant and why you chose to follow their story. And let's start with Mary Ellen Pleasant, who contributed a lot of money and almost went broke when she tried to further the cause of abolitionist John Brown.
Yeah, so I mean, she actually did end up going broke. I mean, she had an incredible story. Mm-hmm. So she was born free in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
In Philadelphia. She grew up in Massachusetts,
right,
on the island of Nantucket, which was like all the big whaling boom was going on, all the Moby Dick sort of stuff with Ahab and trying to catch whales and become rich that way. She grew up in that, and so Nantucket was a boom town because whaling was really, really, really profitable. When she reached womanhood, she ended up going to San Francisco during the gold rush, because folks were making a lot of money out there. And, she kind of, miraculously, she kind of knew what to do when she got there because she had grown up in a boom town.
Like Nantucket, which is right, Nantucket. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it was just booming. So, whale oil, which was like the, petroleum was like the gasoline of that era, is like the second or third most profitable business in America at the time. So, she knew what it was like to be in a booming area and, how to make money. And so what she did is she went about providing services to the miners. She didn't try to, of course, go mine gold herself. She opened, boarding houses. She became a money lender. She traded in silver. She just had her hands in everything in California, in San Francisco.
But she stayed behind the scene, though. She stayed behind the scene.
She stayed behind the scenes. She was active, but she always worked with men. A lot of times worked with, Caucasians. So a lot of folks did not know that she was necessarily the one, sort of with the money and, with the insights. So she made a lot of money and, she ended up in 1858, having a meeting with John Brown, the revolutionary tried to start a slave revolt in America. And she gave him $45,000. So he started his slave revolt at Harper's Ferry, which failed, of course.
Right.
And after that happened, folks started trying to track down everybody
who was associated with it,
who was associated with her. So she went into, hiding. She basically, broke or didn't have access to any of her money at that point, and
she made a comeback though.
Yeah, she made a comeback. We're
going to come back a little bit on the next break, and we're going to talk about the other 5 people that you featured in this book. An amazing book. If you're an entrepreneur, you got to buy this book because the fact that you say, hey, I'm against the odds, they really were against the odds. We'll be back with more with Shomari Wills and this amazing book from HarperCollins. Hi, this is Rushion McDonald. I'm back with Money Making Conversations. On the phone, I have Shomari Wills. He is the author of Black Fortune. Tells the story of six millionaires, black millionaires, including landowner Robert Reed Church. Here's an interesting fact I got from the book. Between the years of 1830 and 1827, as the last generation of blacks born into slavery was reaching maturity, a small group of industrious, tenacious, and daring men and women broke new ground to attain the highest level of financial success. But here's something about slavery. The lifespan for an enslaved African American was between 22 and 36 years. That's an incredible stat. That knowing that, if you hit 40, you were lucky to hit 40 years of age. So when you was building this information about this story, I'm sure there was some points in it that made you very emotional.
Yeah, that was one of them, just realizing how short, a lot of these folks' lives, were, and how hard the life of being, enslaved was, and how hard, folks fought, to end slavery, so it was emotional and gripping at, many different points.
Yeah, that when I read that, I went, wow. That's really, really, really amazing. Well, we feature several situations in this book, millionaires in this book. And Robert Reed Church, he's responsible, I would like to say, for Beale Street in Memphis, Tennessee. Let's talk about his story and why it was important to have him included in this book.
I think Robert Reed Church, in my opinion, he's up there with one of with the most impressive Americans to ever live.
Yes.
So, he was born into slavery,
Mm-hmm.
to a white man, to a steamship owner,
Mm-hmm.
and his black concubine.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he was raised on his father's steamship as a slave, sort of working in the kitchens and all that sort of stuff. And these steamships, they did two things. They were luxury transportation
Mm-hmm.
Up and down the Mississippi, but the main source of revenue was that they shipped cotton.
Mm-hmm.
So he was enslaved on
Mm-hmm.
this ship, shipping cotton, down the Mississippi to the port of New Orleans to
Mm-hmm.
get shipped all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually he escaped. He jumps off
That ship, right? Jumped off the boat.
Yeah, and he's
Mm-hmm.
in the Mississippi outside of Memphis, and he, swims to freedom,
Mm-hmm.
washes up on the shore of Memphis and sort of builds a life for himself. And nothing was ever easy. He was always involved in real estate and, owning bars and parlors and different things of that nature. And everything he had, at some point someone tried to take it from him. He was, had two different assassination attempts.
He was shot in the head twice.
Shot in the head twice. Just had to deal with, groups of, white race mobs. A good friend of his was lynched at some point. So he kept a pistol on his side at all times, and he just never gave up, and became this big time real estate owner in Memphis, and used his money and his power to help black politicians along the way. And at the end of his life, he was even friends with Roosevelt. He's friends with the president.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he just had an amazing story. He's one of my favorite historical figures.
Well, let's be honest about it. Basically, his wealth saved Memphis because he was one of the first people who bought a bond, which was
absolutely not just black Memphis in general. So Memphis had a bad yellow fever outbreak in the 1870s, which almost destroyed the city. I think something like a fifth of the population died, and people were just leaving the city like crazy. And Memphis was completely bankrupt. So as they tried to rebuild the city, they needed people to loan them money. So they issued bonds. And the first person to buy a bond was Robert Reed Church, a black man,
right,
in this southern city. And, kind of when he stepped out, other businessmen started buying bonds as well. So he had a big part in saving Memphis and bringing it back.
Let's talk about a couple of questions I want to ask you. In what way is the book you wrote different from the book you set out to write?
Well, I think the biggest way is I kind of, wanted to kind of try to, as best I could, put down on paper who the first black millionaires actually were. And, they were all over the place. Bob Church was in Memphis, Mary Ellen Pleasant in California, O.W. Gurley in Oklahoma, Hannah Elias in New York, Annie Malone in, the Midwest. But so I didn't expect their stories to intersect, but they actually did a lot because the black business community was tight-knit. And, Booker T. Washington actually had a organization, the National Negro Business League, and they would have conventions every year, and a lot of them met there. A lot of them also knew Frederick Douglass when he was alive, and Booker T. Washington, of course, and W.E.B. Du Bois. So just how much their stories intersected, even though they were in different parts of the country, was sort of amazing to me.
Well, it's really interesting. This is kind of like the hidden figures for entrepreneurship, because we don't know about these people and what they have accomplished, and the fact that they accomplished under such great odds and the adversity. Why don't we know more about these black millionaires?
Well, I mean, I asked myself that question when I was writing this. I think part of it is that people think Madam C.J. Walker is the first black millionaire, and that was kind of a Black history non-fact. It's been pushed out a lot, and I even heard it growing up. So we
believe me, you're not the only one, Mr. Wills. I was right there with you. When I read your book, I went, okay, now I'm educated properly.
Right. And she never really had $1 million. I mean, she became wealthy towards 19. But there were folks that had, a millionaire status, in the 1850s and 1860s, 50 years, half a century before that. And so I think it's part of it. C.J. Walker myth is a big part of it. And I'm just happy to try to get the information, out there, for folks to know that there is a history of us having wealth, a history of us being successful in business that dates back, a really, really long time, longer than most of us think.
First of all, I want to make sure people understand this about our conversation. There's nothing negative about what we're saying about Madam C.J. Walker. I want to make sure people understand that. It's just the information that's been given to us over the years. We have not been given the full story, and that's what your book delivers. Your book is delivering the full story. If you're a person who wants to understand the pitfalls of entrepreneurship, overcoming the odds, Church is a great story because when there was a disaster in the city of Memphis, he was right there to take advantage of it. That's what made him smart. That's what made these individuals. They were always visionaries. They were all forward-thinking people. They were all people who saw an opportunity and they jumped on it. They didn't and capitalized on it. And I think that is the story that I feel that if you're an entrepreneur, and this book is about entrepreneurship, and I feel people should read it if you're thinking about if you're a small business owner or a Fortune 500 company. I feel you should read this book because of the fact that it allows you to understand how you can win against all odds. That's the biggest takeaway I got from your book, Wills.
I appreciate that. And I think people always ask me, like, what is, this book takes place so long in the past, how does it apply to business people now? And I think the trait that these folks had is that they were visionaries, like you said, and they weren't necessarily looking to go into traditional businesses or, businesses that black people had gone into before, like restaurant owning or grocery stores or catering, which were the biggest businesses for black people at the time. They were looking at high growth, high risk, high reward industries, the gold rush, becoming a real estate owner in a rebuilding, southern city, building a town. Mm-hmm. One of the characters in mine did Annie Malone. She built a black hair business when there was no such thing. Mm-hmm. And so they were not looking at, what's the traditional business for people to go into. They were looking at, for big opportunities. They were really on the cutting edge for their time. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's something that applies today with tech and artificial intelligence and, mm-hmm. Biotechnology. It would be great to see more black folks trying to be on, the cutting edge, taking inspiration, from these folks because we're really underrepresented in a lot of those areas.
Well, I had this same conversation with Lanier Richardson. He's over at the Rutgers School of Business. He was saying the same thing. And the drones, automatic cars, just not going to the traditional restaurant, car wash, the services that we tend to fall into on a regular basis. There's so many, artificial intelligence. There's so many levels of the STEM programs that we need to be rushing into because of the fact that technology is not going anywhere. But I want to just let you know that your book, Black Fortunes, the story of the first 6 African Americans who escaped slavery and became millionaires, is an amazing book. It is a must-read book. I've enjoyed it. It also has pictures. The thing I loved about the book is just how you allowed the stories to be told. You just didn't do a chapter completely about the story. You showed how they kind of cross paths, and I thought that was really impressive, Mr. Wills.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
If you want to buy this book, go to Amazon. Just type in Black Fortunes. It'll pop right up. It should give you a short bio about the book and let you understand you're about to read something very significant. You keep up the great work, my friend, and I hope we cross paths in the future.
Me too. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.